How many of you have lost the ability to imagine? You know, when you were a young kid, you had dreams. The imagination was limitless. The possibilities were limitless. But then stuff happens. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said, "Shift happens." And that's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to shift. We're going to rearrange our thoughts about what happened. And we're kicking off the Imagine series for 4 weeks. And my wife and I, Marcia, are leading a Imagine small group experience. And we're also doing this in conjunction with City on a Hill Productions. Our own Cindy Marino, right over here. Cindy, take a bow. She works with City on a Hill Productions, and so we're working in conjunction with them. They help to produce, work with the company that produced the film, I Can Only Imagine. And if you haven't seen the movie, it's fantastic. I would encourage you to be sure and see it. But yeah, join us on Wednesday nights. It'll be a great experience for you. You know, as iron sharpens iron, one friend sharpens another. And so we need one another to grow. We're better together. It's great what God's doing in your life individually. It's wonderful to meet Him one-on-one. But we grow when 2 or 3 of us gather together in His name. So come on out Wednesday night, 6:30. And would love to have you join us for this experience, as we have a 12-minute video that we're going to show. And then there'll be some conversation with my wife and I. And then we'll split up into, she'll lead the girls group, I'll lead the guys group. And it'll be an amazing experience. We'll have you out here by 8 p.m. I think you're going to grow immensely through it. So we're going to see a short video clip, and then I'll be back up and we'll dive right into the sermon.
I was born in 1972. When my dad was in high school, he's an All-American football player. He got a full scholarship to SMU. He got homesick, hurt his knee, so he ended up coming home, getting married, and started working for the Texas Highway Department. He got hit by a semi-truck, but he's such a big guy that he didn't break any bones in his body, but he has pretty severe head damage and was in a coma for about 8 weeks. When he came to from the coma, he just had these really crazy fits of rage. Like, it took about 12 people to hold him down, leather strapped him down, and I don't know how much longer he's in the hospital, but it never went away. My mom said the guy that went in the hospital was different than the guy that I brought home. If a commercial was too long in the middle of a TV show I was watching, he would throw a couch end over end. He never laid a finger on my mom, but he would break things that were very important to her. And so she eventually left.
Hey.
Mama? Mama? Where's Mama?
She's gone.
Gone where?
She ran off. She ain't coming back. Just you and me now.
When will she be back?
I told you she run off. She don't want me no more, and she don't want you neither.
Back then, whoever left, they were kind of to blame. Family around them kind of were like, you know, we think the boy should stay in the hometown with the rest of the family. They still saw my dad as a stable option. I tend to believe she kind of got bullied into leaving us. At this point, my dad had never been abusive towards me, and so no one really had reason to think that was going to happen. But the second that she moved away, and something changed, and it was a scary childhood, to say the least.
So do you like my t-shirt? I found this out of town. So I may ask you, hey, can I get an amen? All right. Hey, through this series, we're going to do 3 things. And by the way, we don't have sermon notes in your program, but we have homework. So what you have in your program is for you to take this week, and it's your homework for the week. And every week, that's what we're going to do. So don't look at it now, but don't forget that it's there. Through this series, we're going to do 3 R's, okay? We're going to do 3 R's. The first one is recall. Everybody say recall. Second one is to reorient. Everybody say reorient. The third one is reimagine. Yeah, so we're going to recall the past. We're going to reorient ourselves to where we are right now in terms of how are we with the past, but then we're going to reimagine the future. We're going to reimagine what could be. So recall with me for a moment. How was your childhood? How was your relationship with your dad? Or was he even around? How was your relationship with your mom? Because God represents, the Father in heaven represents both mother and father, and none of us had a perfect mother and father. You know, I grew up in what seemed like the perfect home, the all-American family. I mean, you know, it was like it couldn't get any better than this. And yet there were difficulties that I had to work through in my life. My father went to every game that I ever played in sports, never missed a game. I played college football at UK. He went my freshman year. I was on the traveling squad. It was a big deal. Oh, I get to be on the kickoff team, the punt team, the kickoff return team. He went to every game, even out of town. Went to LSU, went to Penn State, went to Florida, went to Athens, down between the hedges in Georgia. He'd come in and pray with me every night. I went to a Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp when I was 13 years old, and it was at that camp that I discovered that you can know Jesus Christ in a personal way. That it's not about religion, and it's not about trying to keep a bunch of rules and regulations, but it's about having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I heard a guy who was an All-American football player at University of Alabama share his testimony. And that night around a campfire, a group of 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds, many of them prayed and invited Jesus into their lives, and I was one of them. And you know, something really changed because I had no interest in God. You know, I'd go to church every Sunday, and I'd sit up in the balcony. My dad would be in the choir, and you know, and occasionally, well, not occasionally, but I'd say consistently, I'd slip out and go run around the church and cause trouble. But and then I'd get in trouble because he could see that I'm not in the balcony. I made this fake Robert Pittman doll that I would carry in and put in one of the chairs, then I would slip out, and I'm just teasing. So, you know, there was a change that happened in me. And I came home, many of you heard me tell this story before, but there were 2 of my buddies that were with me, and we came home so changed that we wanted to carry on the experience. Something had happened, and we wanted to carry on that kind of intimate, small group, relational, we grow better together experience. And so we started a Monday night Bible study for teens at our house. And you know what? We continued that study all the way till I graduated high school at Tates Creek High School in Lexington and went on to play at UK. And during that time, my dad would come in my room every night to kind of like tuck me in bed. See, I got that image of the father my dad was a very tender man. My dad was a very generous man. That's because, you know, I try to live generously, and that's because I had a father who modeled generosity. I've had pastors who mentored me, modeled generosity. I can tell you, it is more blessed to give than to receive. If you're bound by feeling like you cannot give, I want to encourage you to get out from under that, because there is freedom in giving. Giving is whatever you can. You let go of that. And you say, you know what, I want to be a kind of person that blesses other people. I want to be a kind of person that makes a difference in this world by being generous. It's great freedom that comes with that. But there was one thing that was missing with my dad. It was that moment when I was 13, prior to going to that Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp, that I got caught drinking. And he didn't know quite how to have the conversation with me about that. Because in his home, his dad was a binge drinker. And he would have those weeks where everything would be great, but then there was a slip. And he would binge. His grandfather, or his father, ran a jewelry store in Carlisle, Kentucky, outside of Paris. And when he would go on that binge, my grandmother would have to go down and run the store as best she could. My dad, he was the oldest. There was 2 sons. He was the oldest. And he would get up at 4 a.m. and deliver newspapers. He was the responsible one. He was kind of the hero child that brought dignity to the family, that excelled. But he didn't have a filter to talk about the pain that they felt when for 2 days and 3 days his father was gone. And no one knew where he was. You know, it wasn't until I was in my 30s that my father and I sat down and we were able to begin to have a conversation about that. As a result of that, I learned not to feel. I learned that God was in my head and God was in my heart, and there was some emotion with it because there was something definitely that happened in that experience at the Fellowship of Christian Athletes camp. But there was another part of me that was shut off emotionally. And there was another part of me too, since my dad gave me this rigid Christian lecture how Christians don't drink and Pittmans don't drink, and you're not going to run around with these friends anymore, it just set me up to be secretive and to be isolated and to keep my feelings to myself. It was through the help of a counselor after I entered ministry that I was able to begin to get free of being locked up, frozen emotionally. Not able to get out and nobody could get in. It was the best 2 years that I ever spent in my life. But you know, as I look back, and as wonderful as my dad, I'm saying this to say that people that know my dad and know my family, they think you've got the perfect family. We did not have the perfect family. And every one of us in this room fall in that category. And so I want to invite you to recall just for a moment what that was like. I want to invite you to recall what was missing. Was your father or mother distant? Were they available? How emotionally connected were they? Were they over-controlling? Were they over-involved in your life? Were they distant? Were they judgmental? Were they disappointed in you? Was a huge thing. Did they always demand more and you never felt like you could please? And then I want you to now reorient yourself to the present, because we do such a great job of numbing out, don't we? And you know what? Work does a great job. As great as work is, work does a great job to numb us out, as well as a whole list of other things. You know, you might say today, hey, it's all good. Hey, I'm good. But guess what? It can be better. And without knowing it, what happens is we transfer the experience that we had with our dad, or the experience that we didn't have, or with our mom, and we transfer that onto God. It happens all the time. It happens in counseling. We do it with people at work. We do it in friendships. We do it with neighbors. Somebody reminds you of someone that you had a bad experience. I mean, they just have the look. And you say, well, I'm not going to get close to that person. As you reorient yourself to this present moment, where are you with all that? Are you good? There's an art therapist that I read about that goes into an inner city school works with troubled kids through art therapy, kids that have an environment of pain, kids that many of them don't have a father. Kids who have tough situations they're dealing with that they're trying to process. They're trying to get through and maybe hopefully find a better way. And in that moment of art therapy that she does with them once a week, she invites them to close their eyes. And she says, okay, kids, let's now enter imagination station. And an imagination station where they begin to paint and draw, there's no limits of what they could become. There's nothing holding them back. The possibilities are limitless as they reimagine, and they have a context for dealing with their pain. What about you? How good at you are imagining? See, God's given us the gift to imagine. Ephesians 3:20 says this, that God is the God who's able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all that we ask or even imagine. One time somebody came to Jesus and was talking about money. You know, we all think that money is the ticket. It'll get us anything we want, but if we're smart, we know that's not a reality. And they were kind of talking about money, and so Jesus said this, and they were talking about possibilities, like being able to do something that's kind of like, almost like miraculous, almost like very difficult to do. And Jesus said this, humanly speaking, it's impossible, but with God, all things are possible. I love a verse, it's from the prophet Joel, and it says this, it's Joel 2:25, it says that God is the God who is able to make it up to you for the wasted barren years. I want to tell you, you may be good with what happened, but let me tell you what, it can be better. Because your relationship with God can be better. Because the experience you had with your mom or dad, in many ways, is an exact representation of the kind of relationship you have with your Father in heaven right at this moment, and you maybe didn't even realize it. Which is why that you live so driven. Which is why that you live so anxious. Which is why you live feeling like you can never please. Which is why you live not quite so sure you're forgiven. Which is why you live with worry around money. Because that's how your parents lived. And maybe there wasn't security. In Matthew chapter 3, verse 17, Jesus is preparing for his ministry. And one of the things that is very important to note, he had not preached a sermon. He had not healed anyone. He had not done anything. But there's an amazing statement that the Father in heaven makes about Jesus. And before we dive into that, I want to invite you to close your eyes and enter into imagination station. Just for a moment. Close your eyes with me. Let last week go. Let this morning go. Let the past go. You've recalled for a moment. And now you're at the present. But I want to invite you to imagine. And I want to invite you in the silence of your heart to say, God, would you do more? Just say that. Just whisper it. God, would you do more? More than I could imagine. Yeah. And the little baby says, amen. That's right. Now, before we dive into this amazing thought that could be revolutionary for your life, everybody say revolutionary. It can be revolutionary what you're going to hear today. And I'm not the one that said it. Because I don't say anything revolutionary, but Jesus does. Before we dive into that, I want to just tell you two key thoughts in terms of as you've recalled the past, you've reoriented yourself to the present, and you're reimagining what can be. There's two key thoughts I want to give you real quickly. If your mother and father fell short, which they probably did, there's an amazing verse in the Psalms that says this, even if your mother and father deserted you, the Lord will take you in. Even if your mother and father fell short, even if your mother and father weren't quite what you were hoping they would be, the Lord will take you in. The Lord will make up the difference. It's very important that you're able to transition and say, you know what? I didn't get that, but I can get it from you, Father. And the second idea I want to say is this, it's redefining the word Father. Now, in Middle Eastern culture, the culture that Jesus grew up in, Middle Eastern fathers were dignified. They were authoritative. They were stern in a sense. And the word father throughout the Old Testament generally was used to deal with a father over a group of people, over a tribe. It was a father who was authoritative. It wasn't necessarily a father who was accessible. It was the dignified father. And Jesus comes along and he says, at one time he said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. In fact, he goes on, he says too about himself that I am the way and I am the truth and I am the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. But he knew that the people in that culture had this kind of rigid view of the Father, this kind of authoritative view of the Father, this kind of view of the Father that he's the Father over he's the CEO over the company. But only certain people have access. And he tells this amazing story about the prodigal son who had asked for his inheritance early, and he wasted it on women and prostitutes and partying. And he finally comes to his senses and he says, I'll return home to my father. And it says this, that the father saw him and he ran and he embraced him and kissed him. Let me tell you something. That was a very unusual story because a Middle Eastern father in that culture, they would wear these long robes. And a Middle Eastern father would never be caught running. Because for one, they'd have to like pull their robe up and then everybody's going to see, and then they're going to have to run. They're going to have to see my behind. You know, that's not very dignified. You get the drift. You Google it and you'll find all kinds of interesting information about it. I'm saying that a Middle Eastern father would not be undignified. But Jesus is trying to say you have a Father in heaven who's undignified in his love for you. He doesn't care what people think. And he introduced this word called Abba. Everybody say Abba. He began to introduce this idea of that God is Abba. It was an Aramaic word. And it meant undignified, but it meant this. It meant personal. It meant one-on-one. He's not the CEO of the company. He's the CEO to the individual. You can come into my office. You can have a chair, and I'm not going to sit behind my desk. I'm going to come out behind my desk, and we're going to sit together, and we're going to talk. He's the Father. He's the Abba who's up close, and he is personal. And the word Abba also had the idea of referring to, it literally means daddy. It literally means papa, or it can mean dad. And it reminds me of, Andrew and Hannah have a beautiful little girl named Lily. Andrew and Hannah, wave your hands there. They do our social media here at the church, by the way. If you notice some of the photos on our website and Facebook, that's from them, Instagram and so forth. We're moving in that direction, trying to develop that. They're doing a great job. But they've also got a little boy named Jack. Jack is amazing. He is just so full of love and joy and life. I love to just give Jack a hug when he comes in the door. How old is Jack? He'll be 6, yeah. You see, if you could see me and Jack interacting, that's the kind of interaction that Jesus is trying to describe about the Father in heaven. He's Abba. You can come to him like a little child. He is safe. He is secure. He is intimate. He's accessible. He doesn't judge you. He doesn't hold himself aloof. He doesn't hold back because you didn't do too good that day or you didn't perform up to standards. He is Abba. And so Abba speaks this word over Jesus. Jesus had not done anything, but he comes to his baptism. And before he launches his ministry, he's going to be baptized. And John the Baptist baptizes him. You would be baptized in that culture if you were identifying yourself with a rabbi. You would say, this is my leader. This is who I'm following. This is who I'm trying to be like. And you would be baptized. And Jesus was baptized as he got ready to launch his ministry. And then it says this, that a voice emerged from heaven. Everyone heard it. It was mysterious. And it said this is the Son that I love. This is the apple of my eye. And I want to show you something about that. First of all, I've already mentioned it. It was said before Jesus ever performed anything. See, we're not human doings, we are human beings. We live in a culture that we feel like machines, don't we? Before Jesus ever performed anything, before he ever did anything, Abba said in heaven, "You're my son that I love. You're the apple of my eye." God doesn't love you out of your performance. He loves you because you're his child. Now imagine with me this. You could probably imagine, as you imagine, that Abba, the Father, feels that way about Jesus. True? And you could probably imagine that Abba, the Father, felt that way about the 12 original core disciples that Jesus mentored for 3 years. He invited 12 men into relationship with him. Of course, he had an entourage of women that also were a part of the inner circle. That he actually raised up 70 more disciples, and many significant women were in great roles in leadership, which we believe in this church, men and women have equal access in terms of leadership. Women, can I get an amen? Yeah. Come on, ladies. Amen. So, we could imagine that Abba, Father, if he were to speak a word of identity, a word of love, would say that not only about Jesus, the Son of God, not only about the 12 core disciples, many of them whom had written books in the Bible. Of course he would say that about them. You're the son that I love. You're the apple of my eye. But now I want you to imagine this and move from your head to your heart. Do you believe that the Father feels that way about you? Do you believe, not only just think it, but do you feel it? That he says about you, ladies, you're the daughter that I love. You're the apple of my eye. He says this about you guys. You're the son that I love. You're the apple of my eye. You see, there's this moment that spiritual resistance is going to come into your head, and your head is not your friend. Your mind is not your friend at this moment. Because the enemy does not want you to get how in love Abba is with you. Because it will revolutionize your life. Because love covers a multitude of sins. Because nothing is stronger than love. Love will revolutionize your home. Love will revolutionize your workplace. Love will revolutionize your past. Love will revolutionize the experience you had with your dad, your mom. It will revolutionize your future. If you could get this. So I want to point you to one of the most amazing passages in all the Bible. And I'm going to prove to you through what Jesus said that Abba in heaven feels the same way about Jesus, the same way about the disciples. He feels the same way about you. See? He even said amen. John chapter 17, Jesus is praying. And he says this, I am now making an appeal to you, Father, on their behalf, meaning the 12 disciples. This request is not for the entire world. Oh, great, Jesus, thanks. Well, I say I'm out. This request is not for the entire world. It is for those whom you have given to me, the 12. And then he goes through and he prays this amazing prayer for them, that they would be secure, they'd be set apart, they would feel their comfort, his presence, so on and so forth. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. Great, you know. But then he says this in verse 20. I'm not asking solely for these disciples. This prayer is also for all who will ever believe in me and follow me. This prayer is also for all. You know what the word all means in the original Greek? The New Testament was written in Greek, by the way. You know what the word all means in the original Greek? That's right, it means all. It means the same thing in Spanish, same thing in French. This is for all who will ever believe in me and follow me. Father, may they all be one as you are in me and I'm in you. May they be in us, for by this unity the world is going to believe. So by this I'm arguing, I'm mad, I won't forgive you. There's fighting and conflict, and we're biting and we're devouring one another, and the world is not going to believe. The world doesn't want to come to church. Mahatma Gandhi said this, I'd be a Christian if it weren't for Christians. But the world will believe because of love. Because nothing is stronger than love. His love. So that the world may believe. Verse 23, and here's the key thought. I in them and you in me, that they may be refined, so that all, there it is again, so that all will know that you have sent me and that you love them in the same way you love me. And that you love them in the same way that you love me. You know how you get something to where it's a part of your life and second nature? You consciously think about it. You write note cards to yourself, you put post-it notes, you say it over and over again, and before you know it, all of a sudden, it's become unconsciously competent. Because you were consciously competent. And you took it from your head and it began to get into your heart because it is true. It says this, that the Father in heaven loves you in the same way that he loves Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. Do you believe that? Because it is the truth. And that message of love will revolutionize your life. Because through all of your wanting, the thing that you're longing for the most is the love of the Father.